The most dramatic reshaping of China's economic geography did not begin with a war, a reform, or a grand political vision. It began with a drought, a routine regional drought that seemed to require nothing more than an emergency response. No one expected it to lead anywhere significant, but it ended up transforming China's population, its cities, and the entire distribution of its wealth. And it was all triggered, quite unintentionally, by an emperor solving an immediate problem. Around the late 10th and early 11th century, southern China was hit by a series of droughts. Traditional rice varieties were heavily dependent on water. When rainfall dropped, harvests collapsed. The situation in Fujian was particularly severe. Local officials sent reports to the court mentioning one useful detail. Far to the south, in a kingdom called Champa, roughly present-day central and southern Vietnam, there was a variety of rice that matured unusually fast and could withstand drought. The information reached the emperor. His name was Emperor Zhenzong of Song. Most people remember him, if they remember him at all, for the Treaty of Chanyuan, a deal in which he agreed to pay the Liao dynasty hundreds of thousands of units of silver and silk every year in exchange for peace. In the eyes of later historians, he was no bold conqueror like the first emperor of Qin or Emperor Wu of Han. He was more of a pragmatic manager, the kind of ruler who preferred to pay his way out of trouble rather than fight. When the drought reports landed on his desk, he made a decision entirely in character. No grand engineering project, no massive mobilization, just an order. Bring seeds from Champa, try planting them in Fujian, and see what happens. It was the smallest possible response to an immediate crisis. No one considered it a major policy decision, including him. Champa rice was fundamentally different from traditional Chinese varieties. Traditional rice required a long growing season and large amounts of water, limiting farmers to a single harvest per year. Champa rice matured much faster and tolerated dry conditions. This meant the same plot of land could produce 2 harvests a year, sometimes even 3. In an agricultural society, that was almost equivalent to doubling the amount of farmland overnight. The seeds were first tested in Fujian. The results exceeded expectations. The court ordered the new variety to be distributed across the Jiangnan region and beyond. Imagine a farmer in a Fujian village scattering these unfamiliar seeds into his paddy for the first time. He had no idea what they would produce. A few months later, he brought in his first harvest, much earlier than usual. He hesitated, then planted a second round. By the end of the year, the same plot had yielded 2 full crops. He probably just thought he had gotten lucky. He had no way of knowing that the same thing was happening simultaneously on countless fields across the entire South. The immediate problem was solved, the drought emergency passed, but the story did not end there. Champa rice had not merely relieved a seasonal crisis, it had unleashed a force far beyond anything anyone had anticipated. In an agricultural society, the single greatest constraint on population growth is food. When the food supply suddenly doubles, population almost inevitably surges. China's population grew from roughly 50 or 60 million in the late 10th century to over 100 million by the 12th century. It nearly doubled. This was not gradual growth, it was an explosion. And the chain reaction did not stop there. When agriculture could feed more people were freed from farming. They became artisans, merchants, boatmen, scholars. Cities began to swell. Kaifeng, the Song capital, and later Linan became among the most prosperous cities on earth. If you have ever seen the painting along the river during the Qingming festival, the dense shop fronts, the bustling crowds, the cargo boats packed along the waterway, that is a portrait of this transformation in action. Commerce flourished on an unprecedented scale, handicraft industries boomed, and gradually, China's economic center of gravity began a fundamental shift. In earlier eras, the wealthiest regions had been in the north, clustered around the Yellow River Basin. But from the Song dynasty onward, the south steadily overtook the north to become the richest part of China. Historians call this process the southward shift of China's economic center. Open an economic map of China today, and the pattern is still visible. The wealthiest, most densely populated regions are almost all in the south. That pattern, which persists to this day, can be traced back 1,000 years to a single grain of rice. Pull the lens back further, and there is a striking parallel. Europe did not experience a comparable agricultural revolution until centuries later, when Columbus reached the Americas and brought back maize and potatoes, crops that fueled Europe's own population explosion and contributed to its rise as a global power. But China's agricultural revolution came hundreds of years earlier, not because Chinese technology was more advanced, but because one emperor, while dealing with a drought, was willing to learn a single crop from a small foreign kingdom. Emperor Zhenzong of Song almost certainly never understood what he had done. He was just trying to solve a drought. He did not know that grain of rice would double China's population. He did not know it would give rise to some of the most prosperous cities the world had ever seen. He did not know it would push his entire nation's center of wealth from north to south.